Center for Abundant Aging in United Church Homes. We continue to look at what it means to age in the 21st century, engaging in positive and empowering conversations that challenge, encourage, and inspire all to age with abundance. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Janis Clark Johnston. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Dr. Janis Clark Johnston is a psychologist, a published author, and blogger of her reflective writing series, Pearls of Peace, which explores everyday life through the lens of mindfulness, growth, and emotional resilience. A former family therapist who worked with individuals ages 3 to 83, Johnston spends decades helping people navigate life's transitions before transitioning her own career from clinical practice to writing. Originally from Indiana, she earned her doctorate from Boston University and has lived in Boston, Philadelphia, Illinois, and now Washington State. Her own cross-country moves and career shifts have shaped her interest in continuity, connection, and identity in later life. She's also the author of Transforming Retirement, Rewire and Grow Your Legacy, where she challenges readers to think beyond financial portfolios and cultivate what she calls a psychological portfolio, one rooted in purpose, connection, health, and meaning. So, Janice, as we get started, just noting that you've lived in multiple regions in the country and you've transitioned careers, how have your own personal transitions shaped the way you think about aging and the transitions that we experience through life?
I think moving to live in several places in the country has been an enormous education for me. I don't think I would have guessed this as I would say a journey in my childhood, but it's been exciting. And I've always learned something new, not just about different parts of the country, but also in meeting lots and lots of different people who have very different ideas about how things should happen, both in their families, certainly, but in wider life. So it's been an education. But I think a transition, and that could be not just moving across the country, but certainly if you're moving jobs or if you're moving just to a new community, it's a real out of your comfort zone kind of time. And that is exactly when you're likely to grow most. I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, but our brains actually like new things. So when you move, or when you change careers, or when you just move in your community to another neighborhood, you are challenging your brain. So it's all good stuff.
Yeah, I was actually just reading an article earlier today, and this physician is saying every year he learns something new, and it can be anything from learning a new hobby to studying a new language, whatever it is, and I think that that surprises a lot of people. They don't necessarily think about doing new things later in life. I know that just as it's helpful to do new things, it's also helpful to have some things that are familiar to help ground us. And in our conversation, particularly with, well, before the move, but you've been able to continue it after the move, thanks to technology, that you participate in a group every morning at 6:30 a.m. Tell us about that group and what that continued connection does for you, and how that's helped you with this transition of moving from Chicagoland to Washington State.
The group is called Mindful Reflection. The initiation was actually 12 years ago, just meeting once a month for outside meditation, and meeting every week on Tuesday evening for a mindful reflection group. And then the pandemic hit. One of our members asked, can't we do something every morning? I'm having a really tough time staying in and not being able to see everybody. And so we began meeting in the morning. Our convener thought, oh, it'll maybe be 3 months. Well, here we are. We're into our sixth year and we haven't missed a morning. So 7 days a week, it's just a half hour. There's a facilitator who gives a reading for maybe 5 minutes. And then we sit in silence online for 20 minutes. And then the facilitator wraps up with maybe a short poem for 2 to 3 minutes. And I have to say that every morning of mindful reflection is a good way to start the day. I'm going to refer to the brain a lot in our time together because it's so important for longevity. And there's research that talks about how important meditation is for the brain. It's really about listening. It's about listening to your breathing, and it's about listening to those thoughts that just go so constantly, and then coming back to your breath and thinking, wow, I can't believe I had all these thoughts in just 20 minutes. Some people might call this centering prayer.
Mhm.
Some people call it meditation. We call it mindful reflection.
Well, I love the gift um, of being able to do that online because suddenly your half an hour really is just a half an hour because you're not having to go someplace and get back. Um, but also that you kind of hold each other accountable, right?
We do.
So because people notice if you're there every day and you don't show up, um, and I think that that accountability is a good practice to help make sure that you continue that. Yeah, that's very very cool. Very cool. Now, um, you mentioned in your retirement book that you focus on developing the psychological portfolio. I know that research that's been done over the course of the past, really the past 10 years, that people have been observing that we have not spent enough time doing the non-financial aspects of retirement planning. Um, and so I love your concept of the psychological portfolio. So what do you mean by that? And what all do you include in that portfolio as being important?
I think your psychological portfolio is your personality.
Mm-hmm.
And many people erroneously think that once you reach adulthood, or certainly when you reach the age of your 60s, 70s, 80s, that your personality is set. But that is not true. Personalities are very malleable. And I think if we can focus more of our time during our seasoned citizen years, that we will be able to look maybe with a curious eye. I've been doing such and such for a long time. Do I really need to do that anymore?
Mm-hmm.
I think asking yourself questions, taking a look at your personality, and seeing if there are parts that maybe you've neglected. For many people, that has been exercise. And once again, exercise is really good for the brain. So we're building some building blocks here for your portfolio, and they do include some time to be reflective, whether you call it mindful reflection or not, some time to exercise. Sometimes you need to look at your personality and see what's in your portfolio psychologically.
Well, and I think that part of that is also examining, okay, what have I been telling myself about who I am? and what if those messages aren't helpful anymore and I just need to let them go? It's surprising to me, have conversation again and again. And I don't even remember who this one was with, but we were talking about creativity in later life and post career life, and they said, "Well, I'm not creative." You know, I was told as a child, I'm just not creative. And it's like, why? No, we are all creative. And just because you may not be able to do the particular method of art that's being taught doesn't mean that creativity isn't a part of you. And so, um, but the problem is that takes work to examine those messages and to figure out how to let go of the ones that aren't helpful.
I agree. And creativity is a wonderful thing to be thinking about. I think everybody has a creative part in them. Some people may have used it in one direction. For example, in their career, I'm thinking about a gal who was in graphic design, but that's only one way to be creative. There are so many ways.
Well, and creativity is an everyday thing. It's not just something that we do at work or something we do as a hobby. But when you go to make that recipe and you realize you don't have a key ingredient and you can't get to the store, it's a creative process to figure out, okay, what am I going to substitute here? So yeah, yeah,
Yes, creativity is needed for problem solving.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is something that they say as we age, we have the capacity of doing that very well because of our lived experience. Now, one of the things that you've observed about retirement is that this is can include a process of grieving. So, what is it that you hear people are grieving the most as they leave their primary careers and trying to figure out what this next period of life is going to be for them?
I think probably the biggest thing that a lot of people grieve is the loss of their professional identity.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in the survey that I gave 125 people, and they were ages 55 to 96, one woman said that it took her 10 years to be able to get over her loss of her professional identity.
Yeah,
She had been a social worker.
yeah,
That had been a career, was very meaningful to her. It wasn't just a job. And I think a lot of people feel that way, that they had a career and it was a huge part of their psychological
right.
profile, their personality, to be able to say, in this woman's case, I am a social worker. Um, Fortunately for her, she was able to rewire. That's my word for being able to face whatever it is that you are grieving, you are transitioning, you are changing, to be able to face it head on and say, I've got choices here. What are they? That is so important. So now we're back to problem solving, which brings us back to creativity.
Creativity.
Yes, yes, there's a nice little loop here, but it is tough to grieve. I wouldn't say that it's easy. I have had personal grieving in my life. I think most of us who live to be a certain age have lost a lot of very special people in their lives, and perhaps they have lost their career.
Right. And whether or not um, when as they've left their career that was planned or it may have been forced upon them for a variety of reasons prior to their planning, it doesn't matter. I mean, even good transitions can create a grieving process because of what we once knew is no longer there. Yeah, yeah,
Very true. Very true. My second book, Midlife Maze, is about grieving. I just had so many people in my private practice of family therapy who were in midlife, and it might surprise you, but midlife goes from 35 to 64.
yep, yep,
It is the longest developmental stage for some people. For other people, retirement is their longest developmental stage because there are people who retire at 55. And if they live as long as my parents into their 90s, that's a lot of years. But I think it's important to understand that there's no right way to grieve, that it's not just follow Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her 5 steps. And believe me, I'm a huge fan of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but she never meant for
right.
people to follow steps in grieving because it's different for every single person. And maybe that's part of what makes grieving so challenging, along with the fact that the culture in the United States is not particularly friendly to grieving, not in terms of taking time off work,
Right.
not not in terms of really wanting to hear about someone's grief because it makes us uncomfortable. And yet, talking about grief is one of the ways of coping with grief.
Yeah, absolutely. And unresolved grief. That doesn't mean that resolved grief means that we stopped feeling the loss, but if we haven't dealt with it, it's going to come out sideways in all different kinds of ways that can be unhealthy and don't appear to be related to the original thing we were grieving. But yeah, yeah, really important. So what are some of the differences in this period of life that you have noticed between men and women as they're in this transition? Um, regarding the structures that they form. We've talked a little bit about identity, relationship to money and income, and socialization.
This is really important. Again, I think we have to look at our culture, and our culture has not really been friendly to men or women, but in different ways. I think that for men, when they leave their career, it is such a huge loss because we in our culture expect men to be the breadwinner, even though many women are the major breadwinner for their families, or sometimes as single parents having 2 jobs just to try and put food on the table and pay the rent. But for men, I think they don't necessarily have as many social connections as women. And it goes beyond the culture. I think we have to look at the biology.
Hmm.
If we can understand that women are very much in the role of tend and befriend. This
Yeah.
is a phrase that comes from Shelley Taylor. She is from UCLA, and she really honed in on why is it that more women have social relationships that are really sound, secure, and not always is that the case for men. And what she has discovered in her research is that it's all about the hormone oxytocin.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's called the cuddle hormone or the cuddle chemical, but oxytocin is really helped out by estrogen. And of course, women have an abundance of estrogen when they're younger. especially when they're pregnant. And there's lots and lots of oxytocin flowing in pregnancy because it's about bonding.
Yeah.
So men don't have as much oxytocin. They do have some, and of course there are many men who make lots of friendships, but there is a difference biologically, and I think maybe we don't tend to give that credit or to understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I've also observed that the other roles that traditionally women have carried apart from their professional lives, whether that's being a mother or the one who has primary responsibilities for things in the house, that for those individuals, once their professional lives have finished, those other roles are still there. um,
Yes.
and men haven't embraced those same roles within the household the way women have, and so in some ways they have new opportunities to kind of redefine what some of those are going to be. I had an interesting conversation with a couple within the family about 30 years ago as they were getting ready. He was getting ready to retire. She had been primarily the person who stayed at home and took care of the family. And he was imagining that when he was no longer working, that he was willing to re-examine those roles that they had had within the home. And he said, I imagine that I'm going to be helping to cook more now. And, and she was like, no, you will not. The kitchen is mine. She was not willing to give up that place in the house. And then he's like, oh, okay. But at that point in time, she had not imagined that there would be that negotiation of some of those roles around the house. So, what kinds of questions should people be asking themselves before they retire as a way of doing this non-financial pre-retirement planning, of assembling their psychological portfolio?
I think one of the big questions is to ask, what would you do in life if you knew you could not fail?
Ah,
Because a lot of us, especially in the aging process, we tend to rule out things. Oh, I couldn't do that. Oh, learning a second language, that sounds really complicated. But actually, you can't fail at learning a second language. It's just how much do you want to learn? Would you like to learn enough? We'll take Spanish because it's a really popular one and could be really helpful for all of us in America if we were bilingual.
mm-hmm.
You can learn just a few phrases, and perhaps you travel somewhere where Spanish is the main language, and you can order in a restaurant and you feel competent because you have studied all of the foods and you know the names in Spanish. It's not like there is a bar, you must learn this much Spanish. So I think if we just try to get out of that idea that we might fail or we might not learn it completely. Well, what does completely mean?
Well, we're not taking it for grades.
No, there aren't any grades.
So how much do we need to learn to experience
Exactly.
joy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another way of asking the question is, what have you ever dreamed of?
Mm.
I'm thinking of a client who had been a librarian for many, many years. And he liked his career. He was good at his career. He was in administration, But when it came time for him to retire, he jumped into a master's program in poetry and began writing poems. So there are so many different avenues for people. And we're back to choice, which brings us back to the brain because the brain loves to be stimulated. It doesn't have to be writing poetry, it doesn't have to be learning a second language. Perhaps it's a musical instrument. One that is really fun that I can recommend to everyone that I enjoy is the Native American flute.
Mm-hmm.
I learned about this instrument in the Southwest, and you don't have to have music. You make up your own. How cool is that?
Yeah, yeah.
So there are so many different choices, and there are a lot of questions. So start asking.
Yeah. Another thing that you point out is the fact that whenever we're in transition, but particularly at the time of retirement, there's this letting go process, um, and how do we go about letting go? How do we approach? How should we be approaching that?
Well, this is a time to be asking more questions
Hmm.
because what are we letting go of? That's important to know. You can hold on to all of the learning that you have amassed. That's pretty important. You can be grateful for all of the grit that you have gathered up in terms of making it through life this far. I think it's all about mindset.
Yeah.
And I write in my book, Transforming Retirement, about having a growth and grit mindset. I think that both are important. The growth mindset is so important because you are really understanding that potential doesn't exactly have limits. And we can keep on growing. I call myself a lifelong learner. I happen to love learning, but it doesn't have to be taking classes or it doesn't have to be in any formal sense. You can decide what topics you want to move into, and that will help you with letting go of whatever it
Yeah.
is that you can't take with you. You can't take your old job with you, perhaps. And that's where the grieving process
Yeah.
may hit you.
So what are the hallmarks then of the grit mindset?
So if you have grit, you have passion plus persistence.
Hmm.
And in my parents' generation, it would have been called stick to itiveness. I don't know if
Yep.
you've ever
Yep.
heard
Oh
that
yeah. Oh
phrase,
yeah. Yeah.
but it's all about not giving up.
Yeah.
In fact, the research has looked at which people made it through West Point and which individuals did not. It wasn't about talent, it was about the ones who never gave up.
Yeah.
When the going got rough, they kept on going. That is what grit is. And with the aging process, especially if there are health
Yep.
concerns,
Yep.
it takes it takes a passion and it certainly takes persistence if you have to go through physical therapy. Um, it's not a lot of fun. It uh, it might hurt a bit in terms of trying to get yourself back into working order.
Yeah.
It takes grit.
In and it also is that letting go of, okay, how did I think I was supposed to be able to exist in the world, and that's not possible anymore. Um, and
Right.
and with the letting go comes is the possibility of letting come. How do we let come? Um, how we let come what we need in order to approach what's next. Yeah, yeah. So you transitioned from practicing psychology to writing. What did that career shift teach you about reinvention in later life?
I had writing, in a sense, as part of my first career as a school psychologist. I wrote hundreds of psychological test reports after
Hmm.
testing children who were referred by their teachers. I also wrote journal articles in journals of special education about adolescents who were challenged in school, which meant that their parents were also very
Yeah.
challenged. But I didn't really know how to write books. I took a number of writing classes and learned that you write what you know. And actually, isn't that what life is all about at this point? Take what you know and you move it forward,
Yeah.
because that's having a growth mindset. And for me, writing has been taking psychology forward. I have written about topics that I saw a need to make a difference. For example, in my parenting book, which is called It Takes a Child to Raise a Parent, I talk about how important it is for you in becoming a parent to understand where you came from as a child. And probably you had a hand in teaching your own parents how to be parents. And now your child or children teach you a bit about what is really important. And for some of us, it might be the first time that we go back and look at something that happened when we were 6 years old, because you didn't have abstract thinking then. You were a concrete thinker. You couldn't really figure out all of the snafus or traumas that happened to you. But your child comes home from school, bullied, let's say, and that triggers in you,
Yeah.
the parent, a time
Yeah.
when you were bullied. And now you can deal with it. You can cope with it. You can heal it. So there's really a lot in terms of the writing process that was helpful to me personally, but I hope that it's helpful to others who read what I write.
Well, I can tell you the transforming retirement, as you can see, I've got things earmarked here, have been very helpful to me in some of the work that I've been doing with others. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience in that way. As we bring our conversation to a close, there are three questions that we ask all of our guests. So the first one is, when you think about your own aging, what has changed about you and what do you like about your older self today?
Well, one thing that is a difference, I have had a couple of falls. For example, I walked off of a curb and
Mm,
badly twisted an ankle. I fell down some stairs and fractured bones in my foot. So when I referenced physical therapy, I have been there
yep.
because of these injuries. And those kinds of things never happened to me when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the issues with aging is we have a different proprioception. We have a different way of having balance.
Yeah.
So that is something that is different, but mostly I'm me. I'm delighted to have my cognition rolling and have all kinds of interests that I'm privileged to be able to enjoy. I think that the main thing that we want to focus on in this age is crystallized
Mm-hmm.
intelligence, which is all about your experience. And by this age, I have read countless books. Um, I had to leave a lot of them behind in my last hometown public library book sale. I couldn't bring all of them along because I don't have built-in bookshelves in my new home. But as you can see behind me, I have some bookshelves and I was able to bring some of my books. I think being able to keep learning and to keep adding to your crystallized intelligence is an enormous gift. So I feel I have a wider perspective on life in in the decade of
Mm-hmm.
my 70s.
Nice. So, what surprises you about what you're doing at your age right now?
Well, I'm surprised that I moved across the country, but my daughter asked me to come to her hometown, and all fingers crossed, she hopefully stays in this town because moving is really a very big transition.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of grit involved in making a move. So that's a surprise. And a very recent surprise, I've discovered the poetry network here in the town of Olympia, Washington, and am surprised to find myself really enjoying writing poems.
Good for you.
I had written a few many, many years ago, but this is a very vibrant, creative community, and the poems are dynamite. So it's inspiring, and it's a different form of writing than I usually do. So
Yep.
it's surprising, but very pleasant surprises.
Speaking about creativity. Yeah, very cool. And finally, is there someone that you've met or someone who set an example that inspires you to age abundantly?
Oh, that's an easy question. It would be my mother.
Hmm.
My mom was enormously creative. She was passionate and she certainly was persistent. She, I think, set the tone for how to be a participant in our democracy.
Hmm.
Mom knew all of her senators, House of Representative individuals, whether we're talking in her home state of Indiana or we're talking about at a national level. She was on a first name basis with all of these people.
Hmm.
And when they were in town in South Bend, Indiana, where she lived, she stopped by their office because she knew when they would be in town. She wrote letters to first ladies. She wrote letters to presidents. She even hand wrote a letter to Nikita Khrushchev.
Hmm.
And all of these letters were about world peace and how important it is that we all work together. She was incredible. And she lived to 99 and a half.
Nice. Wow.
So I walk in her shoes, and believe me, I can't fill them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully she, and I'm sure she inspired others as well, so that you were not the only one who are who whose life she touched. Yeah. Yeah. What a precious story and poignant for this particular point in history as well. Yeah. Well, thank you, Janice. Now, if anybody wants to be in touch, where can they find you? How can they be in touch with you?
They can find me on my web. My website is pretty easy to find. It's Janis, spelled Janis, Johnston, Johnston. So both together.com. And on the website, really at the top of the website, there is my email and also a cell number that they can call.
Excellent.
Also, they can check in on my writing
Great.
progress on Pearls of Peace, a family psychologist circle of life blog. And they are certainly free to subscribe. I don't sell things on my blog. I just put out my ideas for the week. It comes out every Monday early. I welcome people to make comments. Most people who know me are making their comments privately. They don't want to be on the internet
Yeah.
with their
Yeah.
commenting.
Yeah.
But I certainly welcome people's
Yeah.
comments about what I write on Pearls of Peace.
Well, and after just sharing the story of your mother, I'm guessing that the title of that blog is a nod to your mom.
How did you guess?
That's very tender. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's always lovely to be in touch with you. And thank you to our listeners for the time with this episode of The Art of Aging, part of the United Church Home's Abundant Aging series. If you would like to participate in engaging conversations, please check out our new Abundant Aging Insight webinars. You can find the registration page on our website, abundantaging.org, or you can connect with us on Facebook. Until next time, blessings to you.